Hello, I'm back. The tea was absolutely beautiful, and I had about 4 sips of it. Absolute sacrilege. So, section 2. And the bigger picture of how this pandemic hoax plays out, because it connects into a vast, vast picture. And that picture can be summed up as a cultural revolution, which is actually a transformation of human society, the human society as we've known it. So you can see the obvious transformations. Like they're talking about creating the new normal or the Great Reset, which are their terms. I mean, the Great Reset was in a book a few books ago, that this was one of the codes they had for the transformation of human society, and now they're openly using it, the Great Reset, the new normal. And like I say, you can see the obvious ones, like football grounds full of people, football grounds with nobody there, crowds with cardboard cutouts in the seats. I mean, what a wonderful symbolic picture this is. People literally in pens watching a concert. Bars and pubs and all the things that we used to know are just not the same anymore. And restaurants where some of them put dummies in some tables to create social distancing. And again, as I said earlier, don't have fun by order. The culture is being transformed. The new normal, musicals without singing. Someone actually suggested that in government, apparently. And a systematic cultural destruction in theatres, sport, pubs, everything. All these different aspects of human culture disappearing because of this pandemic. It's all part of this bigger picture of the Cultural Revolution. Like Mao's Cultural Revolution, it's going global. But it goes deeper, much deeper, than just the things that you obviously see. Some of them I've just mentioned. And it goes into something called identity politics. This is at the core of the Cultural Revolution. And it's about divide and rule and many other things. So the more identities that you create, the more IMRs, as I call them, the more potential you have for fault lines to play different self-identity groups off against each other. And if we go back to the subconscious, which is where this is all being played out, it's change perception and you change society. Because what is human society? It is a projection of individual and collective human perception. If our perceptions change, our behavior changes, human society changes. Simple as that. So if you want to change society, you've got to change perception, because society will then change to mirror that perceptual change. And so part of this, only part, but currently a big part, is this whole thing about Black Lives Matter, which is about identity politics in its base foundation form in relation to that which is behind it, which is the 1%. Now, when you have a phrase, a saying like Black Lives Matter, the reason they've hijacked that for this organization is it's something you can't argue with. Of course, Black Lives Matter. But then everyone's life matters. It matters equally if we really are about being truly inclusive and not being divisive and working on superiority. So you can't really argue with Black Lives Matter. No reason to. But I tell you what, if you say capital B, capital L, and capital M, Black Lives Matter, then I will argue with you. Because that's not the same thing, and that is what most people miss that follow this whole Black Lives Matter movement. But what a lot of black people have absolutely seen through and can see what it's really all about. That's why so many reject it. Black Lives Matter, the organization, is a creation, like many of its type within the so-called woke movement. It was created by the cult. It is funded by the cult to a phenomenal amount of money. And its job is to divide the target population on the grounds of race. Because what you don't want, your worst nightmare, is a unified population facing you. If you're the few and you've got to control a vast population, you need the population at war with itself. So they're so busy fighting each other, they don't see you holding the strings to all sides, and they look up and they see the same hands holding the strings. You don't want that. You don't want unity. So George Soros, who is a massive asset of the cult, just like Gates, and what happens with these people is they become incredibly rich because they're assets of the cult. But there is a rider, there is a proviso with that. And that is that although you're going to get phenomenally rich, you have to divert a very large amount of your wealth to, under the guise of philanthropy, funding the wish list of the cult. And they have different specializations. In terms of Soros, one of his specializations is funding the left of politics so that the 1% can take it over. They have taken it over. I'll come to that in a second. And therefore, you don't care about what you're funding. You're funding it for a completely different reason. So George Soros gave Black Lives Matter and Antifa, anti-fascist, that acts like fascists, over $100 million. What? This is the same George Soros that said this: I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do. If anyone thinks that he's spending this money out of the goodness of his heart because he believes in social justice that he and his like have spent their lives destroying, then are you kidding yourself or what? These woke left-of-center organizations, well, they claim to be, they're not really, are funded by the 1% billionaires, the 1% corporations, and the 1% foundations, just like Black Lives Matter, because they are being used to transform global society in the image of the 1%. The 1% matters is what should really be on the poster, because that, although people don't know, is exactly what they're doing. So, because the cult is behind these organizations and wants them to do what they do, which is to divide society, and because the cult controls governments, etc., going on mass protests for Black Lives Matter during the lockdown is fine. Not a problem. But if you go on a mass protest against the lockdown, which the cult doesn't want you to protest again, that's a big problem. Going on the beach, if you're too close to each other, that's the problem. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. But if you want to go on a mass BLM march, that's fine. Not a problem. And the reason for these contradictions is because does it suit the cult or does it not suit the cult? So we have the first woke virus. If you protest for the 1%'s Black Lives Matter, it won't touch you. If you protest against the 1%'s lockdown, it's coming for you. Madness. And I say this, you know, this is what's happened with this 1% manipulated left of center. Well, claims to be left of center, but isn't really. When I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, I grew up in a left of center household, seriously left of center household with my father. And I went down that road as well. I wanted social justice, etc. But the left then was opposing billionaires and, well, millionaires as they were then, and corporations imposing their will on people. And crucially, they were demanding freedom of speech. and freedom of lifestyle. The 1% hijack left now do the opposite. They're in bed, literally financially, with the corporations, and they go on marches demanding that free speech is deleted. There's been a complete reversal of what the left stood for. And so when they spout these platitudes about being anti-fascist, like Antifa, we're anti-fascist. Well, I've got a question for them. Where the hell have you been? Where were you? Where are you? When real fascism is unfolding all around us. Look at the lockdown consequences, anti-fascists, just for a minute. Devastated world economy, massive deletion of independent livelihoods and businesses, fascistic state control and transformation of society, surge in 24/7 surveillance, old people sacrificed, shortened lives through lack of diagnosis and treatment, widespread psychological damage and suicide, domestic violence and child abuse, enforced vaccination. How's that for a definition of fascism, Antifa? What do you think? But instead, they're silent on this. Indeed, antagonistic towards those that are challenging it. Why? Because it's not really anti-fascist. Because they're funded by the fascists. It's about destroying society as it was before for the Great Reset, the new normal. So while all this fascistic mayhem was unfolding all around the world during lockdown, the BLM response was to burn down buildings and businesses, a lot of them for black people, black businesses and such like, while Soros was laughing his socks off, just what he wanted: divide and rule, transform society, civil war, the target population fighting itself. Oh yeah, go on, turn the car over. Hey, that's a great laugh. Hey, well done. Oh, looting stores. Oh, that's good for racial justice. Let's loot from stores. What a load of crap it is. And this very week was a wonderful moment. It was on Fox News. Now, Fox News in America is supposed to be like anti the Antifa woke left. But this guy was on, called Newt Gingrich, not a man I have any political allegiance with. But, to be fair, he was asked about the riots going on in America, and he said in this live interview that George Soros was funding them, and George Soros was particularly funding the election of district attorneys in America, and I've followed this and tracked this. I know he's absolutely right when he says, and when these district attorneys get into office, they stop enforcing the law against the woke, and they let prisoners go who've done, very violent things, and they go on. Many of them have reoffended. So he's making a reasonable point. But look what happened when George Soros' name came up, and this is why you don't hear about what people like this are really doing.
Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right. We're going to. Okay, we're going to move on. A historic day at the White House. We covered it from stem to stem.
So that's what happens when you mention George Soros. And George Soros is one of the most blatant manipulators of human society. He's behind his money is behind these so-called people's revolutions, which are instigated by outside forces, i.e. the cult, through various means, to overthrow regimes in a people's revolution that they want rid of. But you can't mention him because of what he is. So these BLM protests, and I do understand, why people, do this, why people in the woke arena do this, because, they've heard nothing else. But, for goodness sake, get yourself informed so you stop being scammed by these people where you're shouting and calling for social justice funded by people who are destroying social justice every day of their bloody lives. So these BLM protests, they're foot soldiers for the 1%. They don't know they are. Of course not what the inner core does of Black Lives Matter, but people don't. And it's all about this World Economic Forum, what the World Economic Forum calls the Great Reset. And remember, the World Economic Forum was behind the simulation with Gates of the coronavirus pandemic just before the real one broke out. And this is Klaus Schwab. He's been in my books a few times. His ears were burning. He's founder and executive director or executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. Well, that's why you've played the pandemic, mate, as you well know. But this is where the pandemic starts to connect into a much wider picture of what's going on in the world, because it's all part of this great reset transformation of human society. And what is the society that the Great Reset wants? What we started out with, this one. And to do that, they need a year zero. They need to basically delete history, because they want to do something or sell it in a way that has been disastrous in history. Thus, they want to delete that knowledge so that people think it's a good new idea when it's the old idea that was disastrous before. So what you do is you destroy history. Any tyrants that take over a country or take over an area, they want to destroy its history. And so we see George Orwell saying, who controls the past controls the future, who controls the present controls the past. If you control the perception of the past, where we came from, you can massively affect the perception of where we are. And so when these, like ISIS, were going into these areas like Syria, what they would do, and they all do it, is target the historical monuments of the culture that they are trying to subjugate. When there was the invasion of Iraq, the Americans and the British stood aside while the fantastic museums and exhibits in Iraq from ancient Sumer, etc., were destroyed. And now we're seeing history deleted in the name of Black Lives Matter. And history is history. It happened. It's no good saying, well, we must just delete it. It happened. And what you do with history is you learn from it. That's why history is so important. We should learn from history, not destroy it. If you destroy history, you cannot learn from it. But they don't want people to learn from it. They want to repeat it. Thus, they have to delete it in people's minds. And this is another reason, by the way, that history is basically disappeared from so much of the education curriculum, not least in America. Completely rewritten and marginalized, again, for the same reason. So, if various variations of communism, Marxism, brackets fascism under another name, have created at least 100 million dead through Stalin, through Pol Pot on the right, and through Mao in China, then you don't want that being shouted from the rooftops, because you want to sell that idea to the young generation and the woke generation. So you've got to delete its historical consequences, so that people can think they've got a new idea. Oh yeah, new idea. Let's have socialism. Marxist.com. Yeah. Well, it's never really worked out before, because Marxism is a form of fascism and tyranny, top-down tyranny. And here's an irony. the same cult network, because this, like I said earlier on, goes back a long, long time, this cult network. It's not new. It's just reached a certain point in its agenda for humanity, but it's not new. It goes way back. The same cult network that was behind slavery and the networks of slavery, black slavery, are the same networks that are funding Black Lives Matter. The same networks. The same networks that are encouraging people to pull down statues of people who they say were slave owners. Some of them were, at least. But hey, it happened. We learn from it. Put a plaque on the bloody statue. Say this guy did this for this city, but hey, this is where he got his money from. It's history. No, pull it down. And the people that are encouraging to pull down the slave owners are the networks that were the slave owners who now fund Black Lives Matter. The irony is extraordinary, but true. And so they're being played like a violin. And I do understand, because, you know, I'll come to this in a second. The education system has been selling this mindset for generations. And so many people have heard nothing else but what they're told to believe. And so what you get is a repeat, but from another point of view, because we've not learned from history. So the picture on the left is how the black slaves were subjugated and treated, forced down on their knees in submission. Horrible. But the picture on the right is a white woman, young woman, in the last few months, who was stopped on the street by a Black Lives Matter representative and told to get on her knees and confess her white privilege. And the person who did that will think they are different to those that did it to black people. They aren't. And this is what the guy said who told that woman to get down on her knees. How's your self-respect doing? This is what he said. I work for Black Lives Matter. Since I work for that company, my CEO has told me to come out today and bring you on your knees because you have white privilege. And he'll think that he stands for social justice and positive change in society. Oh my God, I'm so sorry for being born the wrong color in a world that's anti-racist. Okay, they just can't see that they are mirrors of that which they oppose. It's not the color of your body, for goodness sake, it's the color of your heart. And then you have taking the knee for Black Lives Matter, the organization funded by the 1% that funded frickin' slavery. It's a Freemasonic ritual. They're laughing at you, people who do this. So we have the politicians take the knee. We have footballers taking the knee to perform a Freemasonic ritual in support of an organization funded by the 1% that funded slavery. And you have the police taking the knee. And behind it is the 1% that's behind the pandemic and so much else that I'm coming to. So Black Lives Matter, that's really good. Fine. As long as it's not the organization, I'm with you. But White Lives Matter is really bad and very controversial. But this is what tells you it's a scam. When all lives matter becomes a racist statement, you know you're dealing with a scam. Because all lives matter is the inclusive statement that everyone should be treated equally and all life is equally important. When that becomes a racist statement, you know it's a scam. Because what does that do? It brings people together. Last thing the cult wants. They want to drive people apart. So white lives matter, bad. Black lives matter, the organization, good. Divide and rule. So you tell little kids they're privileged because they're white. And you tell them it because you're anti-racist. And you say white people are privileged. I wonder if this guy is. Some of them are. Well, don't doubt you. What I challenge, seriously challenge, is the all-encompassing statement, including everybody. Yeah, he's got privilege. How about these two? Two homeless people in San Francisco. One's black, one's white. Difference in their lives, their situation? Zilch. They are both suffering from a system that is run by the 1% behind Black Lives Matter. And instead of wanting them to come together in unity and common cause, they want to drive them apart on the grounds of race when they're both in the same situation caused by the same people, the 1% and all that goes with them. You don't delete racism by reversing it, and that is what is going on. And it's systematic. We are all one. I'll get into this in the last section because that is the most important section of all, funnily enough, the last one. It's the one the 1% really don't want people to know. But we're all one. The color, the creed, the sexuality, they're just experiences. We're all consciousness. We're all each other. But what the cult must do to control is to divide us. And that's what Black Lives Matter is, and that's why it's funded to the phenomenal amount that it is by these people. And Black Lives Matter is part of a whole mentality that's been created by the 1%, not least through the, I was going to say education system there, the programming system. And it's become known as woke. You hear people say, I am woke. They think it means awake. It doesn't. It means asleep. It means solid gold asleep. In many cases, it means it's a coma state. Now, woke started out in the black community in like the 19th century, the early 20th century, and it meant being aware of the situation they were in. That's not the woke I'm talking about. That's why in the answer, my new book, I refer to it as new woke, because it's a new version of the term woke and absolutely not the same. So woke, the mentality, and all the organizations that go with it, like Black Lives Matter, were created by the cult to hijack the left in politics. The thing that I think I mentioned earlier, that this cult is terrified and very, very ill at ease with anything it can't control. It's terrified of states of flux that it can't call. So it's not interested in controlling a football team in a game against another football team. Because you can influence the game that way, but you can't decide what the result's going to be before the game kicks off. So to the cult, it would want to control both sides and the referee so that it knows what the score's going to be before the game starts. It needs to control all sides to control the game. And so it needs to control the left in politics by hijacking it and inverting it, called woke, as it needs to control the right. And this is the definition of woke as it is today. Aware, knowledgeable about your community and the world, with the willingness to assess assess and critique systems of oppression. And like everything that the cult is involved in, the truth is an inversion of that. That's what woke is, an inversion of that. So you have the face of anti-hate. You see all these anti-hate people with hate on their face. This is unbelievable. It's an inversion because it's the face of the 1%. So because of that, we have inclusion groups, woke inclusion groups that exclude, anti-hate groups that hate, anti-racist groups that are racist, anti-sexism groups that are sexist, and diversity groups that destroy diversity. especially diversity of opinion, which woke really is not interested in unless it's its opinion. And so those who shout racism the loudest, another inversion, are the ones most obsessed with race. When I see people, I see consciousness having an experience of a certain kind in a certain type of body. That's what I see. They see the body. I see the consciousness. And yet I'm supposed to be the racist and they're supposed to be the anti-racist. Did I miss something? Did I miss that meeting? And this is a brilliant quote from a journalist on The New Yorker called Jane Mayer. She's talking about the 1% and how it took over the left. And she said, if the 1% wanted to win control of America and the world, they needed to rebrand themselves as the champions of the other 99%. Exactly. And to do that, they had to take over the left and pose as social justice warriors when the opposite was the case. So this is why the woke left organizations across the great spectrum of subjects invariably are funded by 1% billionaires, 1% corporations, and 1% foundations. And if you look at the censorship record of Silicon Valley, your Facebooks, your Googles, and your YouTubes, etc., they censor on behalf of the woke agenda. If you're like woke and you're pushing that agenda, political correctness and climate, the human-caused climate change, all that stuff, that's fine. That's not a problem. But you challenge that agenda, and they're the things that Silicon Valley censors. Why? Because those corporations in Silicon Valley are owned by the cult, which created woke and wants to shut up anyone challenging the woke agenda, which is their agenda. And so when you look at what Orwell talked about in 1984, and you look at the woke agenda, which is, hysterically called the left, it's not. It's hijacked the left and inverted it. Orwell's Big Brother society had to control authority. And with woke, they control through the mob and the cancel culture of silencing people who disagree with them. On the same subject, Orwell's Big Brother society controlled information. The woke agenda is all for censorship of anything that challenges what it wants people to believe. In the same way, Orwell wrote a lot about controlling the language, and it's woke that is driving political correctness, which is what? Changing and controlling the language. Orwell had to control, Orwell's 1984 Big Brother society wanted to control behavior. Well, the woke are invariably in favor of the lockdown situation and the masks and all this stuff, and basically controlling behavior through that. They had massive surveillance in Orwell's 1984 and through technology, which is part of the whole woke agenda, the 1% agenda, surveillance through technology. Orwell, control work. Well, through the lockdown, they're controlling work, whether you have it or not, and vast numbers of people don't have it now that did before. Orwell's 1984 controlled the health system and all that stuff, vaccinations, drugs. And it's woke, invariably, who attacks and abuses anyone that's challenging vaccines. And then Orwell talked a lot about the need to control history in the Big Brother society, and we talked about the way woke wants to control history by basically deleting it. And Orwell's 1984 wanted division, divide and rule the population, and that is what woke is being used for as well. And I could go on for a long time, and when I get to the climate change hoax, I will look at other ways that the woke agenda and the 1% agenda are exactly the same. So you look at all these different things that woke is pressing for, and they're all things the 1% want to introduce to transform human society. And I would say to the people that are behind this and who support this whole woke agenda, you know, I do feel for you because, you know, we have had in the last few generations of young people the most perceptually targeted generations in history, not least because of all the technology involved. And the education system has been taken over by this stuff. And so that's all that young generations recently have heard is this stuff. So their perceptions are obviously going to be affected by it. You know, it's amazing how many young people have not bought it and seen through it. I mean, it's fantastic. But lots of people have bought it. And I would just say to them, just take a breath and just do some research on what you've been told to believe and see if it stands up. Look at alternative ways of looking at what you are saying and see if maybe there are other ways of looking at what you're saying other than what you've been told to believe. And so you see again, Black Lives Matter is supposed to be about racial justice. But one of its policies and goals is to destroy the family structure. What's that got to do with racial justice? But it just happens to be one of the goals of the 1% and the cult, which has been in my books for years and years and years, that destroying the family unit is one of the central goals of the cult and a central goal of the Great Reset and New Normal. And they're paying this pair phenomenal amounts of money, Mr. and Mrs. Woke, to promote this all over the world. And the idea is to divide and rule left and right, and divide and rule woke and right, etc., to create divide and rule and near civil war in America now. And Trump was brought through, because I'm no Trump supporter, as I'm no Democrat supporter, to be the figure on which this division could be created and expanded in a way it's not been before, not in recent times anyway. And there was a Marxist guy called Saul Alinsky, came out of Chicago, and people like Obama followed him, and Hillary Clinton, and Nancy Pelosi. And he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. And it was a guide to how you basically transform a democratic society into a Marxist society. And in terms of why Trump was brought to power by the cult, which also controls the Democrats, he captured it in this part of his book. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, polarize it. Don't try to attack abstract corporations or bureaucracies. Identify a responsible individual, ignore attempts to shift or spread the blame. So Trump was brought through to be that figure where everything was blamed on him and all hatred was focused on him, and that has helped to create this massive division in American society, just as the cult want. And so political debate is reduced to, do you support Trump or do you hate Trump? And so you look at this political division. On one side in America you have the MAGA, Make America Great Again. On the other side you have the woke. But the cult is playing them off against each other to divide and rule the target population so that they can rule the target population. And it's happening in so many different ways. And like I say, it's all come out of the education system, which is a programming operation. So education, controlling the education system is vital to the cult because they have to hold the public in ignorance so they have the power of knowledge that ignorance doesn't have. So you control the education system, and you make sure you keep the public, therefore, in ignorance. Who created the education system in America? J.D. Rockefeller, I think I mentioned it earlier, who gave us the scalpel and drug, big pharma medicine, etc. And who funds, to a massive extent, public education in America, but it's the same around the world? Bill Gates, not least something called Common Core, which means common programming in truth. He has put massive amounts of money into the education system to take it over as he has taken over the health system. And they are in the process of transforming society through education from one, in Orwell's description, one of 2 + 2 = 4, in which facts matter, to one of 2 + 2 = 5, in which facts don't matter. Only how you want things to be is how you say they are. Facts don't matter. This is why you can say something that's factually, provably correct, but you'll still get banned by Twitter or YouTube because it's not politically correct, even though it is factually correct. Because facts don't matter in a 2 + 2 = 5 society, which is what we are fast moving into. And this is a wonderful symbol of what education is. This is from India, certainly from Asia. And they put boxes on the kids' heads to stop them, quote, cheating in exams. But that is what happens every time a child enters a school. They put a box on their head. The way we're going, it won't even be symbolic. And what the education system does, and then it's perpetuated all the way through people's lives in the media, etc., is they are indoctrinated with something I call the postage stamp consensus. This is a narrow band of information, possibility, and perception, which the idea is that you indoctrinate it at the earliest age, and then you perpetuate it all the way through their lives until they drop into the cemetery or whatever, through the media, and that people never break out of that perceptual straitjacket. And if they start to break out, you call them mad, bad, crazy, or dangerous. And so the postage stamp consensus is what holds the public in servitude, perceptually, while the cult holds the information which they use against the ignorant population. So, I've seen studies, some of them major studies over a very long period of time, that have charted the staggering transformation in the psyche of young people from when they enter the school system, bright, joyful, the kind of the wonder of life, and then they come out the other end, preparing children for the workplace, they call it, preparing children for slavery. It really is. And the transformation that goes on is incredible. They become more and more and more perceptually similar. And then what happens is, having had the entire years of their formative years through school and college, university, where what has been happening? The system has been telling them what to believe, been telling them what is, what isn't. From the earliest age, when they enter the classroom, they're told what, when they have to be there, when they can leave, when they can eat, when they can talk, when they can go to the toilet. It's all, again, the subconscious is being constantly programmed with obey authority, and there are consequences for not, and there are rewards sometimes for doing so. And this is preparing them for a life of servitude to authority. So you come out of that, and you go into the world of work. You go into the institutions of finance, of medicine, of academia, science, journalists, whatever. And there you meet people who've been through exactly the same perceptual postage stamp programming that you have, but earlier. And so you've been through that programming. You then go out into the world of work, and around you are loads and loads of people who see the world exactly the same as you do. And because it's all you've ever heard, well, it must be true because, well, everyone knows that, mate. And then you get, like I say, the downside of questioning it or going in another direction. And this is a brilliant quote from the great George Carlin, a very profound man, the American comedian. Governments don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. That is against their interests. They want obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept it. And in those few sentences, he described the reason for the education system. And the idea is, at the earliest age, they put you on the postage stamp and they keep you there all your life, isolated from any other perception. And then anyone that starts to break off, well, they're mad or bad. Get them in, keep them confused, and at the end, get them out as fast as possible when they can't serve you anymore. So what we're looking at now, in front of our eyes, is the transformation from the old normal, which you can symbolize as 2 + 2 = 4, to the new normal of 2 and 2 = 5, when madness becomes normality. And this process that's been going on now for several generations of young people was described in 1984 by a former KGB agent called Yuri Bezmenov when he went to the United States, defected to the United States. And he described 4 stages of transforming a society from a democracy to a tyranny. See if you recognize them. Number 1, demoralization. You educate an entire generation in Marxist ideology. That's basically what the woke mentality is, and why it dominates the school system all over the world now. There's number 2, destabilization of the economy, etc. Then there's crisis, changes of power, leading to normalization. Normalization is a situation where before demoralization, what becomes normal would have been seen as crazy, man. Just go back to February, and someone said to you that what has happened up to this point in the last few months would have happened. They'd say, you are insane. That will never happen. But what we've got is the normalization of what was formerly perceived as crazy. And that's what this ideological transformation is all about. So, this is what Bezmenov said. Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. He's talking about the period of demoralization, the first stage through the education system. A person who is demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic truth, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camps, he will refuse to believe it until he gets a kick in the back bottom, which he means realizes that he's been had by a tyranny he has helped to bring to power. He's now facing the wrath of the tyranny he helped to bring to power. This is revolutions consuming their own children, which happens all the time. He said, when the military boot crashes, then he will understand. And all these woke people that are pressing for this new society, they will be crushed by that new society once they are no longer any use to bringing it in, because it's already there. And so what did he talk about? Facts tell nothing to him. It's the post-fact society, and that's where we are. So normalization at the end of this process is that the new normal is 2 + 2 = 5. A virus that, even if you believe it exists, officially has a death rate below 70 of 0.004% to infection, has to have everybody on the planet vaccinated, people locked down, people losing their jobs, people wearing masks, people social distancing. It's madness, but it's the new normal, which is the normalization of madness. This is how it works. So one of the 2 + 2 = 5 is this: biological sex is a social construct. No, it's not. Don't be silly. If you want to identify as another sex, be my guest. It's none of my business. Good luck to you. But don't tell me that biological sex is a social construct when it's a biological construct. You want to believe 2 and 2 = 5? Be my guest again. But I ain't going there. So the whole woke movement is a pawn of the 1% without realizing it. And this is the other thing, and this is so sad. When you kind of have studied this manipulation of the subconscious and this breaking down of people's self-respect and all the things that go with it, you can look at this whole woke thing and the education system, and you can see the psychological crushing of entire generations, apart from those that won't go with it, who are incredible people given the pressure to go with it. Like, I call it the creation of Generation Jelly. And like I say, it's not the whole generation at all, but it is great numbers. A Generation Jelly that does not want to allow anything in its space which disagrees with what it's been programmed to believe. That they have to deplatform anyone with a different opinion, which is exactly what the 1% want, of course. Political correctness is their creation. And it's breaking down their sense of self, their sovereignty, their, like I say, self-respect, their uniqueness. Progressive PC warrior, here's another point of view. People in their power don't mind other people having an opinion. They want them to. And they want to be challenged. They don't want to just be the only voice because the other voices that challenge you are deleted and censored. And at the heart of this whole woke behavioral modification is this belief of I am right, where I may believe 2 and 2 = 5, but I am right. And if you disagree with me, that means by definition you are wrong. And if you are wrong, what is the point of you having freedom of speech? You were wrong, because you're saying something different to me and I'm right. This is the mentality that justifies mass censorship. And I would make this point: the right to be wrong is the most fundamental freedom. Because if you don't have the right to be wrong, then someone in authority is suddenly having the right to decide who's right and who's wrong, and who can be heard and who can't be heard, and that's the world we live in now. So, the rights of others are offensive. We demand you restrict them. So what has happened is this woke mentality, I am right, has been manipulated to demand that the people the 1% want silenced are silenced. And that's why you never hear the woke mentality kick off at the mass censorship of Silicon Valley, because it's not censoring them. Because the woke are assets of the 1%, and the 1% doesn't want them censored. So, What they're saying is, give me your power, wokers, and I will protect you. I will silence these people who you don't like because they disagree with you. And another fundamental part of this mind control, this woke mind control, is actually authority itself, or the foot soldiers of authority. There's an organization in Britain, it operates in many other countries, and in other countries there are similar organizations anyway. It's called Common Purpose, and what it really means is common perception. And what they've been doing now for a long time, decades, is they've been running training courses for people in the institutions, paid for by government and local government, the taxpayer, like police, even fire officers, local government, national government administrators, all these people. They've been put through training programs. And an organization in Britain called UK Column has done a lot of good work on this. And as a result, loved ones and spouses of people who've been through these programs have contacted them over the years and described the blatant transformation of personality and view and opinion that has gone on with their spouse when they've been through these programs. And this, over a period, has transformed the dynamic between authority and the administration of authority, and even the police and the public. You know, you see leaked training videos from time to time, like I saw one from the FBI, where they were basically indoctrinating FBI employees that the public are the enemy. And you can see this transformation. And so, basically, it's the woke mentality that's being downloaded. So you will have police taking the knee at a Black Lives Matter protest and then carting off a more than 70-year-old Piers Corbyn for speaking at an anti-lockdown rally. This is where this comes from. They've been perceptually reframed, just like the woke. And another part of this woke 1% agenda is to target capitalism. Capitalism isn't working. Well, it certainly isn't working after lockdown. But the point is that we don't have capitalism. You know, you condemn capitalism. We don't have capitalism. We have cartelism. The reason the system is unfair is because it's run by cartels, not free enterprise. So you might have free enterprise among small businesses, but you don't have free enterprise among the Amazons and the billionaires. They stitch up the entire system as the banking system is stitched up. And so again, they're attacking capitalism when the problem is not even capitalism, it's cartelism. And cartelism controls society via the control of money. And one of the amazing things to me over the years is that I've never seen a left-wing, right-wing, centre political party with any chance of forming government, and I've never heard any people in the woke mentality challenging the way money is created, when that is the very foundation of social injustice. And it's not done because the cult runs the financial system and its form of control is controlling the creation of money. And I've talked to economists and I've said, how is money created? And they look at you blank, some of them. They never thought about it, a lot of them. How money is created, the control of money, which is controlled by the cult, is the very foundation of human control. If we don't address that, then nothing's going to change. Money on trees, credit. When you go into a bank and you want to take out a loan of, say, £100,000, what does the bank do? it types into your account £100,000. And you have to pay back £100,000 plus interest. Where does this money come from that it types into your account? Well, because the cult has controlled the banking system and controlled governments, laws have been passed over the years that allow banks to lend vastly more than they actually have, called credit. You notice, in 2008 when they had that crash, they called it the credit crunch. Well, what is credit? Credit is money that has never, does not, and will never exist. It's conjured out of nowhere through something called fractional reserve lending, which allows you to lend far more money than you actually have in the form of credit. So you go into a bank and you want to borrow £100,000, so they type into your account £100,000 of credit, a credit line. This has never, does not, and will never exist. But if you don't pay it back, plus interest, for lending you fresh air money called credit, the bank gets what you've put up as collateral. It gets your home, it gets your land, it gets your resources, gets your business. And all it's done is lend you fresh air called credit. And this process of lending credit and getting resources that, real wealth back when people can't pay back the credit, has sucked into the coffers of the cult the real wealth of the world. This is how the 1% became the 1%, by control of money. And so money is created by private banks making loans of credit. And when they make lots of loans, there's lots of units of exchange in circulation for economic activity. And when they pull the loans in, money goes out of circulation, units of exchange go out of circulation, and the economic activity comes to a halt because there's not the money to generate it. Which means not only do the banks create money in the form of credit, but they control whether there's a boom or a bust by how much they put out and how much they don't. And another point in all this is that when they lend you £100,000, they'll type into your account £100,000. They will create out of nothing £100,000. All right. And that becomes officially money in circulation. But you're not paying back £100,000. You're paying back £100,000 plus interest. The interest is never created, only the principal. So because of that, at any point in time, there's never even close to nearly enough money in circulation to pay back all the principal and all the interests on the outstanding loans. And it's all done systematically, which means that people losing their homes, losing their business, losing their land, their resources, are built into the system. It has to happen because of the way it works. And what they're going to do in the next few months is unleash a frenzy of home foreclosures on the grounds of the pandemic and its effect. So if you think about what freedom is, it's choice. The more choices you have, the more freedom you have. The fewer choices you have, the more freedom less freedom you have. And what dictates people's choices to such a massive extent in the world as it's structured today? Money. So when people say that the financial system is all about greed, of course there's massive amounts of greed, but at its cult core, the control of money is the control of people, because it's the control of choice, which is the control of freedom. But never is this talked about by political parties of any persuasion, and certainly not by the woke. And yet, people all over the world are imprisoned by lack of access to money. which the banks control. And this whole woke mentality is anti-capitalist, when actually cartelism is the problem. And they talk about Marxism and Karl Marx as some kind of hero. But Karl Marx was the banker's boy. He was an asset of the cult. Because Marxism is a top-down tyranny of control, just as fascism is. And so Marxism is a cult creation. This Hunger Games society, whether you call it fascism or Marxism, the impact is the same. If you have a society where control is by control of money and wealth, then you have to accumulate all the wealth to get that control. But in a Marxist society, the very structure of society itself is a top-down structure imposed by the state and by the military of the state. Does anyone think that in China today, which is this Marxist, communist, fascist society, that the people at the bottom live the same lives as the people at the top? No. A tiny, tiny, immensely wealthy elite run China. But it's called Marxism, which is perceived to be a system of the people and equality. It's not. It's another version of cult control. So when the woke mentality is demanding Marxism, they are demanding a structure of top-down control, which is exactly what the elite want for the world. And another point, I'll get some points in here because they're all worth making because of what is happening. Another point in the financial control of people as a result of this pandemic is they lose their jobs because of the lockdowns, but they're also losing jobs because of AI taking over. And so they're saying, how are people going to live? And what they are proposing is something called a universal basic income. And it's important to mention this because it's a scam. Again, you know, I've believed all my life that there should be a level below which no one should be allowed to fall. And they should have support that keep them above that level. And this universal basic income is being sold as something like that. Oh, you know, you've lost your job, there's no work now, we've got the new reset, society's changing, AI is taking jobs, we're going to give you a universal basic income. But this is the scam. That will come at a price. First of all, it will be a very low basic income, survival level, Hunger Games society, bottom of the pyramid, and it will come with strings. You have to do what the state demands, otherwise you don't get the basic income to survive. And you're not going to take the basic income and do what we tell you to get it? Well, where else are you going to earn a living? All the jobs are gone, right? This is the scam. And we've had a forerunner of it in Australia with the no jab, no pay policy, where they say if you don't have your child vaccinated according to a list of vaccinations the government says they must have, you are going to lose benefit payments from the government. This is exactly how this universal basic income is going to be used. For control. And the end of cash, been in my book since the early 1990s. The end of cash is to replace cash currencies with a single world currency, digital currency, which means that everything is under surveillance, everything is under control, and they can wipe out your wealth with the press of a button. And what did Tedros say early on in this pandemic? Best not to use cash, but use cards, because you can get the virus off the cash. But you can't get it off newspapers. The papers were keen to tell us because they need to sell newspapers and the propaganda. Now, this is another massive aspect of what connects into the pandemic hoax, the climate change hoax. It's being perpetrated by exactly the same networks and exactly the same cult to exactly the same end. So when you look at what the climate cultists say must happen, how the world must change to save the world from climate change, it mirrors what they say must happen to save the world from COVID-19, because they're running the same scam. And so you've got two hoaxes, both of them run by selling a perception of something that isn't actually happening. The COVID-19 pandemic and human-caused climate change. And again, what we're now seeing, it was so predictable, is the climate change networks, the cult, are now coming out and saying this great reset has to happen to save the world from climate change as well as COVID-19, because they're all fundamentally connected. So you've got Al Gore, the high priest of climate change, and the UN Secretary General demanding a great reset of global capitalism. This is the transformation of the financial system to save the world from climate change, and the opportunity, they say, is provided by the pandemic hoax. And so you have the Club of Rome coming out and demanding a planetary emergency plan to save the world from climate change at this time of the pandemic. And there's the Club of Rome, one of the cusp organizations of the cult global network. So climate change and the pandemic are fundamentally connected and perpetrated by the same people. And again, the climate cult, woke foot soldiers of the 1%. They're all connected to the 1%. And organizations like Extinction Rebellion seem to be obsessed with death. And what they're demanding too is a Marxist society, which is what the cult want. And you see this occult symbol with the snake eating its own tail and the timer, the sand timer in the middle, time running out. And then you have the Extinction Rebellion symbol, which is the same, basically. And when you see the obsession that this cult has with symbolism, for reasons I've talked about, that's no accident. And another area of common theme between the two is humans are dangerous. You've got to wear a mask because humans are dangerous. You've got to social distance because humans are dangerous. And humans are dangerous because they're destroying the world. So dangerous that some of the extremists in the climate cult, like Dr. Patricia McCormack of Anglia Ruskin University, want humanity to die out and disappear because we're so terrible for the planet. Humans are horrible, dangerous, is a subconscious and conscious theme of both these hoaxes. So you have two hoaxes running to the same line of human control. And they use the same techniques, therefore. Again and again, the climate cult has been exposed for fixing the data on climate and temperature to fit the narrative. And we've seen already how the data is unbelievably fixed with the pandemic to fix and follow the narrative. This is a famous graph of the climate cult called the hockey stick, where we are told to believe that the temperatures were pretty steady all this time, and then only now, whoosh, we're all going to die. And emails were exposed some years ago of how the academics behind that, behind the climate organizations, had conspired together to remove this, the medieval warm period. a period when temperatures were higher than they are now, and at a time when there was no carbon dioxide industry, no cars, none of it. But it put a big question mark onto the narrative. This is happening because of humans. And so it had to go. And by the way, after the medieval warm period, we had the Little Ice Age, when it became extremely cold. These is where the pictures came from of people skating on the Thames when it froze over every winter. And when they say this is the hottest day since records began, many of those records began in the Little Ice Age period, and when we were coming out of it, making comparisons with present day irrelevant. And who has provided many of the computer models that say we're all going to die, and all these extreme measures must be put into place to save the world? Imperial College, home of Neil Ferguson. So, message from the land of sanity. Carbon dioxide is the gas of life. It is plant oxygen, in effect. We breathe it out, they absorb it from the atmosphere, a wonderful symbiosis between humans and nature. But no, it's a demon because it suits the cult agenda. This is a co-founder of Greenpeace, Patrick Moore, who left the organization because of the way it was going. And he says, and he's far from alone, it's not that we have too much carbon dioxide, we don't have enough. He says plants start to die at 150 parts per million, and even when CO2 fell to 180 parts per million 18 years ago, plants began to starve. This only turned around when the temperature went up. What? CO2 increased only when the temperature went up? What? Because of this. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide in cool periods, takes it out of the atmosphere, and when the oceans warm, in warm periods, the ocean releases CO2. It's not that CO2 causes temperature, it's that temperature causes CO2 to be released from the ocean. Again, everything is upside down. And the lag time of the release of the ocean, from the ocean as it warms, is 800 years. We go back 800 years from today, you're hitting the medieval warm period. And if you look at the graphs, the CO2 there is in the yellowy orange. It's following, overwhelmingly following temperature rises. Temperature rises are not following rises in CO2. And more goes on. Today, CO2 stands at around 400 parts per million, and plant life is still relatively starved in nutrition, with the optimum levels for plant growth 5 times higher at 2,000 parts per million, and in some periods of the Earth's history, the ratio has reached 4,000 parts per million. And so, as CO2 has increased in the period of the last 100 years or so, the industrial age, the Earth is getting greener. Why wouldn't it? Because the plant life and the natural world is taking more CO2 out of the atmosphere because there's more of it there. And the green movement wants to reverse that. Now, if you followed the propaganda of the climate hoax, you would think, this is a graph of different greenhouse gases, you would think that one was carbon dioxide. It has to be, with all the hysteria. No. That is water vapor and clouds. right up in the 90% of greenhouse gases, water vapor and clouds. This is CO2, and only part of that is caused by humans. The rest is natural. The overwhelming majority is natural. So just like the pandemic hoax, the climate hoax is built on an absolute inversion of the truth. And this guy, William Happer, is an expert in carbon dioxide. He's a professor at Princeton University. And he made an interesting point. He too says, look, hey, it ain't that we got too much CO2. We ain't got enough. And he makes this point. He says, when you paint a wall red, and then you add, say, another coat, second coat of red, it doesn't matter from that point on, basically, how much more red you put on, the wall doesn't look any redder. And he said that's exactly the case with carbon dioxide. This is what he said. I know a lot about CO2 compared with most climate scientists. There's an interesting thing about CO2 which is unique to CO2. It's not true, for example, of water vapor, methane. This is that if you get 1 degree of warming from doubling CO2, so going from, say, 400 parts per million for simplicity to 800, then to get another degree of warming, you have to double 800. You have to go to 1600. So it gets harder and harder to warm. Technically, they call that the logarithmic dependence of temperature rise on CO2 concentration, which is why Happer says that the overwhelming vast majority of warming that a rise in CO2 is going to cause has already happened and happened some time ago. Now, the climate cult, certainly the inner core, know this. And they've had to find a way of getting around it. And so they've come up with the most complex series of feedback loops to just, I look like in Bill Gates' interview, didn't I? Feedback loops to say why, although carbon dioxide works like that in terms of temperature, that actually other feedback loops mean you're going to have runaway global warming. It's all a bloody lie wherever you look. And the reason you'll notice that polar bears are no longer the poster child of the climate cult is because polar bears are thriving. And so why would they hoax human core climate change? Well, because of this. First of all, the United Nations, which is a cult creation, both runs the climate change agenda via its Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In other words, it controls the narrative of the problem. And it also, through 2 agendas of the UN, called Agenda 21 and Agenda 30, is driving the solution to the problem. And the solution to the problem through these agendas, I detail them in the books, is to transform human society to save the world from this climate change. And that society of those agendas would look like this. Here we go again. We keep coming back to the same thing. And so through the woke mentality network of 1% controlled and funded organizations, you have the pressure for the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is happening all over the place in America through a woke politician called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The Green New Deal is the Marxist New Deal, and what it wants is to transform society in exactly the way that is being suggested in Foundation by the pandemic hoax. So, people, I know you most people in the climate cult are coming from the best of intentions because they believe what they say, because they believe what they've been told. But you're not rebelling for life. You're not, please. You're rebelling for the 1% to transform global society into a Nazi tyranny. Call it Marxist, whatever you want. And Greta Thunberg was brought through, I talk about this in the answer, systematically brought through because they wanted someone who would appeal to the young. Again, target the young. And so now this is a picture of her being painted on a big wall in San Francisco. She's like a global hero to the climate cult. But who was it? Who was it that brought her to public attention and gave her all the publicity to create the cult of Greta? The World Economic Forum of people like Bill Gates that was involved in the pandemic coronavirus simulation just before it happened for real, and the same World Economic Forum that is pressing for the global reset to transform human society. And here you have a kid from Sweden and Prince Charles speaking exactly the same language, both of them at the World Economic Forum. And none of this is by chance. And so you have Greta Thunberg with her propaganda trip across the Atlantic in a yacht that was formerly known as the Edmund de Rothschild and was crewed by people connected to the Monaco royal family. Yep, it's all about the people. And she says, you stole my childhood. Actually, the people behind her stole her childhood. The point is, the people behind her, the 1%, are the ones stealing childhoods all over the world, generation after generation after generation. So, young people, anyone watching this and believe in the climate hoax, please just look at it. Look at other information that challenges what you're saying and realize that it's not the world that's going to end. That's not the point of all this. It's your freedom. And it's your freedom that's the target of the climate cult, and it's your freedom that's the target of the pandemic hoax, and both are controlled by the same force. And one other thing before I leave the weather, we talk about major weather events, and you know, climate change is more and more of these major weather events. Look at the data. Not true. But it's possible with technology today to create extremes of weather. There are whole treaties between countries agreeing that they won't manipulate the weather. Why would you have them if it wasn't possible to manipulate the weather? Of course it is. And so we need to question everything. You know, is it RT, Russia Today? They have this motto, question more. No. Question everything and see if it stands up. And another connection between the climate cult and the pandemic hoax is old people. You know, I've talked about the impact on old people of the pandemic policy, if you can call it that. But look at what is happening with the whole climate cult. It's demonizing old people. It's you old people. You destroyed the world that we've got to live in. Driving apart old and young. And again, it's all part of that agenda. Now, the end game, where all this is leading. The AI technocracy. Technocracy being defined as government or control of society by an elite of technical experts, not elected politicians. And one of the things they're doing is getting people to lose trust, understandably, in elected politicians on the road to deleting them for a technocrat-run technocracy. And where this is all leading, and we're in the process of seeing it now, is to create I've been calling it for decades, a technological sub-reality based on things like 5G, Wi-Fi in all its forms, to which humanity will be connected. This is where we come into the Kurzweil prophecy, he knows what's planned, of connecting the human mind, the human brain, to artificial intelligence in what he calls the cloud. This is what Kurzweil has said. He's a Google executive called a futurist. Humans will have hybrid cloud-powered brains by 2030. Now, 2030 is a year that keeps coming up again and again. Agenda 2030 is the UN plan to transform society into a centralized tyranny justified by saving the world from climate change. Year 2030, when human brains are planned to be connected to AI, and 12 years to save the planet from global warming, when that was last stated, would take us to 2030, 2031. So that's a real focal point that they are looking at in this transformation. And this is what Kurzweil said about connecting the human brain to AI. Our thinking will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. Humans will be able to extend their limitations and think in the cloud. We're going to put gateways in the cloud in our brains, and we're going to gradually merge and enhance ourselves. In my view, that's the nature of being human. We transcend our limitations. And he goes on, as the technology becomes vastly superior to what we are, then the small proportion that is still human gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just utterly negligible. That is what they want to do to humanity, absorb us, assimilate us into artificial intelligence. And this is the road we are on. And they've reached the point now where they can't hide it because they're coming to the point of introducing it. So they've moved from hiding it to selling it. And the sales pitch is, with robots in our brains, we'll be superhuman, godlike, when the idea is we are post-human, subhuman, and completely controlled, and indeed our perceptions come from AI. So up to this point, perception has been manipulated by control of information. This next stage is for our perceptions to come direct through the connection to artificial intelligence, so the human mind as we know it is finished. And we are talking about well within the lifetimes of the vast majority of people today. The whole basis of it is what they call the Internet of Everything. It used to be called the Internet of Things, but add humans and it becomes the Internet of Everything. So what we've had already is endless billions of devices, domestic devices, cars, all these things connected to artificial intelligence. The end game is to connect humans to it, and whoever controls artificial intelligence then controls everything. All technology, all machines, all energy, all food production, all thought and perception. And this is where we're going. I know it's hard for people to appreciate it. It's a lot less hard now after the last few months, but this is where it's going, and it's going fast. And Kurzweil said nanobots, these are tiny, tiny nano robots, which they're too small for the eye to see. Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures. They want to deluge the world and the human body with these nanobots which communicate with each other. Another name for them is smart dust, and neural dust, and digital dust, which are defined as tiny electronic particles for wireless communication with each other and anything they connect with. So it's creating this grid in which these nanobots within the human body and within technology and within the natural world are communicating with each other in a artificial intelligence environment. And the nanobots are being introduced into the body. through various means, and one of them, I suggest, will be the Gates COVID vaccine. Now, the idea is that there is this control grid where everything is connected to the AI grid, which controls everything, including thought and emotion. And for that, you need the cloud Wi-Fi everywhere, on every inch of the planet, so that no one can escape it. So you're seeing Wi-Fi increasingly everywhere, but to get it literally everywhere, you have to project it from space. And what we're seeing is thousands, literally thousands, and Musk alone, Elon Musk wants 42,000 eventually, he says. Satellites are going up in low orbit to fire this stuff, 5G and Wi-Fi in general, at every inch of the planet. And he's only put a relatively few up so far, Musk, but even from those few, the astronomy community are saying we can't see the night sky anymore because of these Musk satellites. At the same time, Bezos at Amazon is involved in putting them up, and all these other major companies. And what we're looking at is the Earth being ringed by these thousands and thousands of satellites firing Wi-Fi 5G at the Earth to create this grid to which the human mind and everything else is connected. Elon Musk, I call him Elon Two Mouths because he says one thing and does another. AI could be the end of humanity, he says, but we must merge with it to save ourselves. So he says AI could be the end of humanity as we know it, true, and then starts a company called Neuralink to connect the human brain to computers. And what Kurzweil calls the cloud is called the smart grid today, where everything is connected to everything else by not least nanotechnology. And so you see all these different things, whether they are technology or a way of doing something, it's called smart. And they're all part of this emerging smart grid of total human control, including smart meters in every home and business that will let them in. And these sub-reality smart cities are called in the documents of these people human settlement zones. And they talk in their documents, Agenda 2030 and all these, of forcing people out of the rural areas into densely populated cities where they can be kept under 24/7 control and surveillance, and the rural areas are cleared, basically, of the population. And what's been happening through these last few decades is through the totalitarian tiptoe, is this has been moving closer and closer to fruition through, again, perception programming. So what they did is they started out with getting people addicted to technology that they hold, smartphones, etc. Well, job done. And then they moved on to getting technology on the body, because the goal was in the body. And so you had the Apple Watches and the Bluetooth and all these gadgets that are on the body. And now they're moving to in the body with microchips. And microchips that are about the size of a grain of rice. But in so many ways, they are a diversion from the nanotechnology that is really the goal of the cult. So humans and smartphones, who controls who? That's a rhetorical question, because it's about getting people addicted to technology so that technology becomes their controller. In other words, AI does. And it's another way of dividing and ruling the target population, just like social distancing with phone distancing and the end of human discourse in so many ways. Now, Aldous Huxley died in 1963, but because he had access to this world, he knew what was coming. And he said, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think, which is precisely what is happening to so many people. And again, I can keep coming back to this with every subject. The conscious mind is given a reason for something, the real reason is subconscious. The reason for the conscious mind of these personal assistants, Icke, Alexa, whatever you call them, is, oh, it's great, you only have to talk to them and they give you all the information you want. Subconscious reason. They want to fuse humans with artificial intelligence. Before they can make a physical connection, fusion, they have to make a psychological fusion and connection. And they're giving us, therefore, more and more technology in which we are interacting with AI as if it is human. I've heard people talking to these things, and they talk to them as if they're human. And it is fusing and eroding that difference between AI and human so that the two can be fused. And this is why they're doing it to kids. It's why they have these AI-connected dolls and toys where kids can talk to AI as if it's human. And the kids are being deluged with this stuff because they're the real target for everything. And another part of this subconscious programming is called preemptive programming. This world I'm describing that they are taking us into, and has been massively advanced in many ways in the last few months with the pandemic, is so fantastic compared to what we're used to that there is a big chasm of possibility that there will be resistance on the grounds of, you want to do what? You want to do what? So what they've been doing, and they've been doing it for decades, is through Hollywood movies and many television programs, they've been portraying the world they want to take us into, a dystopian world and an AI-controlled world. And the idea of preemptive programming is you are making, to an extent, the conscious mind, but overwhelmingly the subconscious mind, familiar with the world you want to take people into for real. And you're making them familiar with it by all these movies portraying that world. And it's called preemptive programming. And so when it comes in for real, there's a sort of familiarity with it that there wouldn't be otherwise. Hollywood is one of the great global centers of perceptual programming. So what we're looking at is an assimilation into artificial intelligence and the end of humans as we've known them. That's the goal, and it's been planned for a very, very long time. And when I talked about, right at the start, about the world army to impose the will of the world government, the world army is not supposed to be human. It's supposed to be AI. And what they're moving to now is more and more weaponry, planes, everything, controlled by AI and not humans. And we're seeing, this technology coming in during the pandemic as part of the patrolling of people. Now, 5G is highly significant because this smart grid needs at least that power of communication to function. And they're already talking about 6G and 7G, but they need at least 5G to do it. And so when they locked down the world and said all these people have to stop working, they listed essential jobs which could continue. And one of them was the rollout of 5G around the world. And so 5G is rolled out faster and faster during this lockdown. And 5G is created and owned by the cult. This is why it's being brought in with no independent tests to see its potential dangers. Because if they had independent tests, then it would never be allowed. But because they control the governments and the government agencies, this is how 5G is coming in without any of these tests and trials. And it doesn't pass through dense objects very well, and so they have to have these broadcasting antennas for 5G at short intervals all the way down the street, outside your child's bedroom, wherever they decide to put them. And the selling point is that you'll download movies in a few seconds. And for that privilege, you are giving your freedom away and your children and grandchildren's freedom away. To put into perspective this 5G, the American, Israeli, and other militaries have a technology at which fires within the 5G frequency, frequencies at crowds of protesters that they want to disperse. And the reason that they run when they activate this 5G range technology is because the skin is an antenna. Just like the body itself is an antenna. It's a receiver-transmitter of information. And what the skin does is it picks up these 5G frequencies and turns them into a feeling that the skin is on fire. And so they run and scatter. That's the 5G frequency. And so the health and psychological impacts and potentials are absolutely catastrophic. And even without 5G, this gives you an idea of the impact of Wi-Fi, never mind 5G Wi-Fi, in plant growth. It's terrible for the natural world. But the green movement is all over the fake threat of global warming and completely ignores the real threat to the natural world of 5G. And another thing about 5G is that at 60 gigahertz, it interacts with the oxygen molecule. This is well known. And that makes the body system, blood system, it makes it more difficult to absorb oxygen. So if you're in an environment of 60 gigahertz 5G, you are going to have your oxygen intake affected. And if you've already got a problem with oxygen intake, then it could be very, very serious indeed. Cumulatively, absolutely. And this doctor, interestingly, I'm not saying this is caused by 5G, but it's an interesting point. This doctor, an emergency doctor in New York, early on in the pandemic, did a video in which he said, we were told to expect to treat something called COVID-19 as a viral pneumonia. He said, but that's not what we're seeing. What I'm seeing, he said, is lungs, these are the more extreme respiratory cases, that are in oxygen deficit. They're not absorbing enough oxygen. He described it, he said the lungs were like you'd put these people on the top of Everest without acclimatization, or they were in a plane at 30,000 feet which started to depressurize. That's what you'd expect to see in the lungs. And it certainly was not viral pneumonia as they were told to expect. And he said this, what I see makes no sense. We were told we were treating a viral pneumonia, but that's not true. We are treating the wrong disease. It resembles high-altitude sickness. Patients are being slowly starved of oxygen. And whatever is actually the cause of that, one theme is becoming clearer and clearer, and that is the theme of denying people the amount of oxygen the body and the brain, mind, needs. because at 60 gigahertz, 5G suppresses the intake of oxygen. And what does that do? All over the world now, suppresses the intake of oxygen. And that's not only going to affect the body, it's going to affect the mind. What did Kathy O'Brien say? They forced my daughter to wear a mask from the age of 2 because by controlling their breathing, oxygen intake, they controlled their perception of their mind. And it just so happens that this technocracy I'm describing, the global cutting edge of it, is China now. It is a technocracy. Phenomenal control of the population through technology and technocrats. And this is an interesting story. I've read a few stories over the years, recent years, where the newspapers have said, what's going on in China? There's all these big cities full of tower blocks and there's no one living there. What's happening? Well, what's happening is these are the smart cities being built by the Chinese to bring the people off the land into for the AI-controlled smart cities of the not-too-distant future. Now, this is completely connected to what I've just been talking about, and this will bring me to the Gates vaccine. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. What is transgenderism? Or what is the reason for the explosion in the whole transgenderism movement? Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. And one other thing, when something comes out of nowhere and is suddenly everywhere, it's the agenda. That's another rule of thumb that people might remember. And what has come out of nowhere but the transgender movement? And again, how people want to perceive themselves, none of my business. But what the real reason for it is, should be everybody's business. And what is the outcome that unveils the journey? They want to create a new life form, altering the fundamentals of human DNA, in fact, the fundamentals of human biology. Aldous Huxley talked about exactly this in Brave New World. The creation of a new human which does not procreate, but is laboratory created. And this is why you are seeing this in more and more headlines and more places. Synthetic biology. It's a synthetic form of biology to replace the biological human body. They're questioning here, synthetic biology, it's alive, but is it life? And this transformation of the human body is not something far into the future, it's already happening. Now you see these kind of robots that are kind of made to look like humans, but in many ways this is a diversion, because the real deal of transforming human biology into synthetic biology and a synthetic human controlled by AI is much deeper than just creating a robot that looks like a human. A synthetic human will have no sexes, no genders, and will not therefore be able to procreate, because that is not the idea. The idea is we have laboratory-created humans. And Aldous Huxley described exactly this in Brave New World in 1932, because he was part of this world and had access to the agenda. Natural reproduction has been done away with, and children are created, decanted, and raised in hatcheries and conditioning centers. From birth, people are genetically designed to fit into one of 5 castes, which are further split into plus and minus members and designed to fulfill predetermined positions within the social and economic strata of the world state. And with that, he was describing where this cult is taking us. This is the maternity ward not too far from now, unless we get a grip of these psychopaths and take our world back. And look at this. Concept incubator envisages babies being grown at home in a pod. Now let's look at a portrayal of what Aldous Huxley was describing in Brave New World. The bloody same. This is where humanity is going. And the pandemic, for multiple reasons, is fundamental to advancing this extremely quickly. And you can see now why the 1% and the 1% control BLM want to destroy the family unit, because this new human will be the end of parents and parenthood. That's why more and more powers that parents have to make decisions about the children are being taken away and given to the state, to the schools, to social services. This is the totalitarian tiptoe to this. So, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. The future has no gender, say the transgender activists. 99% of them not realizing that they are speaking a profound truth. And the end of gender, again, has to first be put into the subconscious mind to become a normal. And so trans rights are human rights. Yes, they are. So is the right to disagree with you. Break the binary. Yes, break the binary for the 1%, because that's where this is going. Why is it, do you think, that country after country after country at the same time decided it would be a great idea to have drag queens go into schools and read stories about transgender, etc., to very young kids? They all kind of had this insight, this is what we'll do at the same time. Of course not. And what, I mean, I'm nothing against drag queens, I'm nothing against anybody. Do what you like so long as you don't impose it on anyone else, is my philosophy. But what is going to confuse little kids about gender more than a frickin' drag queen? And this is the game. Confused gender, confused gender, confused gender, fused gender. This is why they're confusing kids about gender that weren't confused before. Remember when the feelings of girls and women were considered important? Oh, that's so yesterday. Men are being targeted, but women are going to be more and more targeted as well, because they're both genders that procreate. And the new human is not designed to procreate. They want an end of those genders. So you have women's sport being destroyed by male body transgenders. But don't say anything, because it's obviously you're a bigot if you say that's not fair. Breaking news, cyclist who identifies as motorcyclist breaks world cycling record. It's got so ludicrous you can't even parody it anymore. And so now we have another divide and rule, which is between women and the transgender movement. And the future isn't binary, said the 1%. And I've quoted in my books over the years a guy called Dr. Richard Day, who was a Rockefeller insider. Here we go again. And he used to be an executive of Planned Parenthood, which was created by the Rockefellers. Planned Parenthood started out life in the eugenics movement. And Dr. Richard Day stood up at a meeting of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1969, and he asked them not to take notes and to turn off recording equipment, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change, because basically that which he represented was going to change it. Well, in a book called Phantom Self, I detail to quite a great extent what he said that night. It's a mind blower. He wasn't only describing the world we live in today in theme, he was describing it in detail, where it was going. He described the internet in 1969 that wasn't supposed to be invented until the 1980s. And what else did Dr. Richard Day say that night? We are going to make boys and girls the same. None of this is random, ladies and gentlemen. None of it. It's all long planned. So we have the war on men. Why a war on men? Because they are procreators. And they say here the future is female. Sorry. That's a procreator. It's a non-procreating human that we're heading into. So the procreating sexes, they're in the firing line. So why the war on men? Well, you know, the woke people talk about toxic masculinity. Well, the reason they want to destroy masculinity, as well as the fact that it's a procreation gender or sex, is because masculinity and testosterone are liable to say, I ain't frickin' having it, mate. No, not having it. So they don't want that. They want compliant, submissive, subservient people. And so they want rid of masculinity, not just toxic masculinity, masculinity. How about this headline? University of Texas to treat masculinity as a mental health issue. And then, and here we go to the real point, alarming drop in sperm counts need more study. Poor quality Western diet kills sperm counts and lowers male testosterone, study says. Well, yeah, I suppose diet's something to do with it, but it's not everything by any means. I've been tracking this for some time. Sperm counts are plummeting. This is a story on CNN. If sperm were an animal, science might worry that it's heading towards extinction in Western nations. Total sperm count in North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand dropped by up to 60% in the 38 years between 1973 and 2011, an acceleration of a trend that began in the 1940s. More recent studies show the trend is continuing. Because if you're in the process of creating a new human, you also need the old humans to stop procreating. Gender-bending chemicals, plummeting sperm counts, and testosterone. Gender-bending chemicals are in so many things that people consume and touch, including plastic water bottles and till receipts. Why are they in till receipts? Because everyone touches them. So, scientists create new life form in a lab, altering the fundamentals of DNA, and this is the agenda: fusing men and women to become human 2.0, the no-gender human that doesn't procreate. And you're going to see, like I say, women targeted as well as men. Synthetic biology now is appearing everywhere. How is synthetic biology shaping the future of drug discovery? And to develop a coronavirus vaccine, synthetic biologists try to outdo nature. Even as companies rush to develop and test vaccines against the new coronavirus, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the National Institutes of Health are betting that scientists can do even better than what's now in the pipeline. So, the Gates vaccine, rapid development of a synthetic DNA vaccine for COVID-19, which is why I said right at the start of this that the contents of the vaccine were already sitting there before they played the pandemic hoax to justify putting them into every man, woman, and child on the planet. As part of the process of transforming the human form closer to human 2.0. And what Gates is saying now is, well, maybe one vaccine won't be enough, so you'll have to have a vaccination for COVID-19 every year, like flu, cumulatively, more and more. And this is why, for 0.004% and 0.2%, 0.26%, Gates says that every man, woman, and child must have this vaccine before they can go back to any normality. Every man, woman, and child for a virus that, even if it exists, it doesn't, is so undeadly. No. It's something much greater than some virus. And this is why they're saying no Gates vaccine, no normal life, to pressure you into having the vaccine because of what it is planned to do to your body. And let no one imagine there won't be a sterilization agent in it as well to every man, woman, and child on the planet as part of this getting humans, procreating humans to die out. Bill Gates' ID 2020 is a means of tagging people to see who has the vaccine and who had not had the vaccine, and for that to be checked technologically wherever you go. And that's for these figures. It makes no sense because it's not about health. It's about transforming the human form. We've already seen what vaccines can do to mass sterilize people, like in Kenya. And it's happened elsewhere. And this is the kind of stuff that will be in the vaccine to be put into the human body. These nanobots. And this lady, Dr. Carrie Madej, if you look at her on the internet, she's still on YouTube, she does a lot of good stuff about Human 2.0 and what this is all really about. And two of the organizations driving this are called DARPA, this is the technological development arm of the Pentagon, and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which supposedly is there to respond to emergencies and hurricanes, but its real job is very, very different. I've written about this at length in the book since the 90s. And this lady, Celeste Solum, worked for FEMA, and one of her roles was in pandemic preparation with FEMA. And she learned so much about what was planned as a result of that. And she talks about the DARPA deployment through the Gates vaccine of something called hydrogel, which will contain these nanobots, these self-replicating nanobots. So they basically breed and they transform the human body into something else, synthetic biology. And all these bots, of course, are also there to connect us to the smart grid in general. And we should remember this, too. The World Health Organization now says that your child's presence in school counts as informed consent for vaccination, parental presence not required. They said that in 2019 because they knew what was coming in 2020. So this is the new world that science fiction could hardly make up, where we're being taken into in front of our eyes. And what we're looking at is the dehumanization of humanity. And what is that? The dehumanization of humanity. All part of the totalitarian tiptoe to what I'm talking about. Doing nothing is not an option. Taking this shit is not an option. In every way, they try to divide us. BLM, divide on race. Masks, divide just by wearing a mask. I am gay, I am straight, I am lesbian, I am bisexual, I am transgendered, I am human. No, no, no. They are but brief experiences. What we are is the consciousness having those experiences. We are all one, and we are not who we think we are. And that is where I'm going to go in 10 minutes. Another We and a T. See you soon.